can all do this yourself. You can all do this yourself. It's an optical illusion. You see, you get the spoon like this, and you just grip the end of it like this, and you do that, and you give the impression of bending the spoon. You can do it yourself. Just look just like you're bending the
We all have some kind of paranormal ability within us. I think that we all have some kind of energy, some kind of a power inside our mind, and maybe I have it stronger.
There's a great deal of energy in this world, and very few people know how to use it. I'm just a channel for the use of it, because the mind does rule the body. There's no doubt about that. How long since you've done that?
Oh, months.
Months.
It's nice to believe that your fortune or your future is written in the stars, and those stars were placed in those positions, and the planets among them, just to dictate to you what the possibilities were for your life. It's nice to believe that you can get some magical knowledge, some magical control over your life. It's a pleasant sensation. Unfortunately, it doesn't stand up to examination, and most of these people are very, very angry when somebody really wants to examine it dispassionately. But it is a pleasant notion.
James Randi is a professional conjurer. He's also a founder member of a group of skeptics based here in Buffalo, New York, but with members throughout the world. They are called CSICOP, which stands for the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal. CSICOP. Psychologist and amateur magician Ray Hyman, who used to make a living out of reading palms.
When skeptic scientists...
Paul Kurtz, who is not only a philosophy professor and chairman of CSICOP, but also chairman of the International Humanists.
There is a tremendous need.
And James Randi, who is offering $10,000 to anyone who can prove they have paranormal powers.
Level of belief.
CSICOP is a modest effort. It involves hundreds or thousands of scientists worldwide. Perhaps we're like the little Dutch boy with his finger in the dam, but I think someone should put the finger in the dam. I would hate to see the dam burst. No, I think we're playing a role. I think we are providing an alternative position. If we were not there, all that you would have is a tremendous pro-paranormal propaganda.
CSICOPs are not the first to go on a crusade against the paranormal. In the 1850s, scientist Michael Faraday set out to expose the table turners, mediums who claim to be able to turn and lift tables using only the power of the spirits. For Faraday, this was impossible, for it it defied the logic of scientific rationalism. In 1920s America, conjurer Harry Houdini took on the spiritualist mediums. What looks like scrambled egg coming out of this medium's ear is ectoplasm, produced during a trance and claimed to be the material manifestation of the spirits. Houdini thought it was a trick. Here he shows how the ectoplasm is used by mediums to produce fake spirit hands. Now it's Psychop's turn to carry on Houdini's work. In the past 14 years, they say they have disproved hundreds of claimed paranormal events. They are the guardians of science, protectors of the values of rational and deductive inquiry against all comers.
Look, it's like it's becoming like plastic. And it's breaking. It's breaking. There's a crack. You can look. It's very...
Again and again, they have taken on this man, Uri Geller, determined to reveal him as a conjurer and a fraud. Geller is not impressed.
I gave it fast to him because there is no heat. I think that vendetta is the right word, because sometimes I feel that I'm actually being haunted by these people, and they're trying to destroy me or Uri Geller or the myth or the legend or whatever you want to call it. But gosh, I lean back and look at all this wasted energy that is being put into demolishing me and exactly undermining their own cause, because they're making me more famous by attacking me. I'm, in a way, an entertainer. I get to the public more directly, and I pass my message to people out there, to the millions, and that hurts them. God forbid, if Uri Geller says that paranormal powers exist, people out there will believe, and they don't. So they say, well, if we stop Uri Geller, our job will be easier.
I think it's inaccurate to refer to Psychop as skeptics. They're really counter-advocates. They are the protectors of the current scientific paradigm. And that's certainly how many of the more enthusiastic members of that group behave and, I think, see themselves. They're protecting science from the onslaught of what they perceive to be irrationalism.
And in this hour of the show, I'm joined by the amazing Christian Dion. Christian's here with the tarot cards. If you want Christian to have a look at the future, 071 603 1152. So get dialing now for that. Okay, well, the phones are buzzing, and Florence is in Ilford.
As we pick out the cards, there's two things, particularly going back.
Ray Hyman is on the executive council of Psychop. He's listening to tapes of English psychic Christian Dion's radio talk show, sent to him in America by a British associate. In the show, Dion questions callers and gives them psychic readings and advice.
London Talkback Radio.
Hyman came over to London to investigate.
Hi, Yvonne.
All right.
How are you?
Fine.
Shuffling going on?
Shuffle the rounds, yes. Yeah, well, I think people don't actually believe it. I shuffle them all the time and change them around, but we do, kids, we do.
Certainly do.
Whoops. Over the last sort of basically 12 years, it's been a bit of a dodgy patch, Yvonne.
That's right.
And I feel that you have also been draining yourself a lot recently. You've been getting yourself all wound up.
Yeah.
Very, very much so. And without being rude, you've lost your sparkle.
That's right.
You know, it's like you're not you at the minute. We need to get your sparkle back. I think that will be better as we go into the autumn.
It's a bit like being able to view a videotape of someone's life. You can see the past, the present time, the future time, which gives them evidence, if you want, that things you're predicting for the future are good, or at least accurate.
Right. Is there anything particular you wanted to find out about? It just helps him pick up on things. Right, stay on the line. We'll be with you soon. If you can just make sure your radio's turned off, you'll hear it down the line.
Well, what do Dion's callers think? Is Yvonne from Acton convinced of his psychic powers?
Yvonne, you just had a consultation with Christian Dion. What do you think of Christian?
I thought he was good. It was right what he said to me.
What were some of the things that he said that were
Well,
right?
he said there was ups and downs in the last 12 years, and in the last 2, and also that I tend to put everybody else before myself, and I've lost my sparkle. You know, that was all. And he said about a property deal, which I take it he means moving between now and Easter next year.
Is that something you have been thinking
Well,
about?
we have, yeah. And he seems to think that it will happen.
She's just one person, and many, many thousands of people seem to be just as convinced as she is. And the sad thing is that there are alternative explanations.
Today on News Radio.
Back in Buffalo, Hyman is going to show how to read people's minds without psychic powers.
24 minutes after 10 o'clock, my guest in studio, Mr. X, a psychic reader, a gentleman who is able to tell you many things intuitively about yourself through the use of his ability to focus in on your psychic energy, and also with the use of tarot cards, which he has in front of them now. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
How are you?
Fine, thank you. And you?
Good. You sound very chipper and very happy. So I also see that you've had probably some daydreams, only it's a just really fantasy daydream type of thing, where you even thought of maybe running away once in a while, and maybe even starting life anew with a new relationship and so on. But that's just because of this problem of, as you begin to think of the youth that's now slipping by and facing the future.
Oh, good. And that part of it's taken care of. Well, that was remarkably accurate. I compliment you on that.
Thank you now. Bye-bye.
Cold reading is when you meet a client whom you've never met before. We call it meeting them cold, and give them a reading that is insightful and the client thinks gets to the core of his or her personality. And the way this is achieved, in a nutshell, is to give the client general statements that could apply to anyone, but then you gradually refine them by the feedback you get from the client. And once you get this feedback and refine it, you make sure that the whole message is wrapped up with this rule. The basic rule is you tell them what they want to hear. Now let me give you an example of what is like a cold reading. Let me show you what Christian Dion was doing, just this little sample from him.
This year to Easter of next year, before you're able to get the property matter completely organised. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean to say it's going to take the whole of that time. It's in that time.
Did you say property matters?
Property matters.
What do you mean by that?
Well, because around you property-wise, it's as though there's no settlement at the moment.
Yeah.
He's talking about this property matter, and he said it's not necessarily that during that time, but in this time, which actually, if you think about it, covers quite a big range. There's a big range of things there.
The next 5-year block.
You could break down his whole approach to a simple formula, which I think would be very easy to write on a computer. And the reason you can do this, by the way, is that it's not Christian Dion who makes these readings so successful. It's the people who are listening. They are putting the meaning in there.
I haven't actually got a partner.
At all?
No, not in that way, no.
And I'm talking romantically, obviously.
No.
Right. At all?
No, nobody.
All
not
right.
romantically, no.
All right, we'll let that one ride.
I couldn't agree with them more in the saying that anybody can do what I do, because we all have the power. It's just that they haven't, A, got the logic, if they want to use that word, to see that we don't tell them general things anyway. When people come for a reading, it's very specific things. And if I was telling people general things, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing, because people wouldn't come and see me. So the skeptics have got the problem, not myself.
About 97% is my estimation of people who do psychic readings believe in what they're doing. Even though, if you listen to them over and over again, they have a very simple formula, very repetitive.
Do you want it in an honest answer? I think they're thick. I honestly think they are thick.
I mean, do you think it's they feel a challenge to their personal
I think
belief
they,
systems?
well, maybe they have a challenge to the belief systems as we all have, but I think they're basically inadequate and they are thick. I mean, they've tried it before. No doubt they'll attack me after that, and they'll try it again. But good luck to them.
She'll always work because she's completely dedicated. I would like, anyway, without further ado, to introduce you to this remarkable medium, this wonderful sensitive, Doris Collins.
Doris Collins is Britain's most famous medium and healer. And not surprisingly, she hasn't escaped Psychop's attention.
Down here in the front. He'd been pushed back twice in his life. I should think this heart attack was quite sudden.
Yes, very
Because he said to me, it was bump, bump. Here today and gone tomorrow.
Yes.
And he said, you know, there was so much I wanted to do. Now, he's done a strange thing. He's taken me to Australia. Follow this?
Yes.
Why, I don't know. How old was he when he passed? 33 or 34 or something?
No, 49.
49. Okay, I would accept that. He wasn't an old man.
Since Doris Collins won't let me anywhere near her, won't even admit me to the halls where she performs, it's very hard for me to see in person. But I have seen endless films of her and gotten written reports on what she does. She's doing what we call cold reading. She suggests things to individuals in the crowd, and she allows them to develop on these things.
Who's Jim? Or Jimmy? Or Timmy? I'm hearing it, you see. I've got to listen. Don't worry, we'll find out. And he's showing me you as a small boy. I think he must have passed when you were probably 7 or 8 or thereabouts. Can you remember?
No. I'm getting an M in connection with you. What does M mean to you? It's very strong. I see the letter there written in fire, and they'll say, well, that could be Martha, who was my sister. Yes, I knew it was a woman, yes, and very close to you, but M, I got another M as well, but let's deal with Martha for the moment.
Move round this way. Okay.
It is the claimed healing powers of people like Doris Collins that particularly upsets Psychop.
How long since you've done that?
Oh, ages.
People do get hurt. They lose their emotional stability, they lose their finances, and in some cases they lose their lives. And when you talk to the family of a diabetic who's thrown away his insulin 6 or 8 days before because some faith healer struck him on the forehead and said that he was now healed, or he got some sort of a crazy electronic tube with a battery connected to it and a bit of mercury in the top of it in the mail from Australia, that if he fastened it to his arm and wore it, that he wouldn't need the diabetes medicine, the insulin or whatever. And you find that that person died with the thing strapped to his arm or with the words of the faith healer ringing in his ears. That's pretty hard to take.
I've met James Randi. Well, I say I've met him. He, 60 Minutes from Australia, came over and asked me if I would meet him because he wanted to prove, they say, a cookie. That's the American expression. No, I said, I won't have him sit on my platform because I do believe in the great power of thought, and he could try to destroy what I was doing. But I have no objection to him being in my audience. Well, he's got a group of people who he sent to every theatre I performed in, and not one of them proved conclusively that I was a fraud.
Psychop have investigated dozens of claimed UFO sightings over the years, but one case has refused to go away. In 1947, here in New Mexico, witnesses claim to have seen a UFO crash. Major Dick Marcel, who was assigned to nearby Roswell Air Force Base, was sent to pick up the pieces.
There were just fragments strewn all over the area, an area about 3/4 of a mile long and several hundred feet wide. So we proceeded to pick up the parts.
Marcel claims that the crashed saucer was then taken by plane to another Air Force base at Carswell, where they were kept under lock and key. No one was allowed to talk to the press.
They wanted me to tell them about it, and I couldn't say anything. And when the general came in, he told me not to say anything, that he would handle it.
And so, claim the ufologists, began the big cover-up which lasted until 6 years ago, when one man received a top-secret document from an anonymous sender.
It very briefly says that there was a crash saucer recovered outside Roswell, New Mexico in July 1947, that alien bodies, extraterrestrial biological entities, as they call them, were recovered, that in response to this, the government established a group called Operation Majestic 12, named the 12 original members and the 13th who replaced one of the 12 that had died, said this was accountable only to the President of the United States. A very startling document, top secret eyes only, if genuine, clearly one of the most important documents ever leaked to the public, because it says the government has known since 1947 that alien visitors are coming to the planet, that they've been successful in covering it up, but they're seriously concerned about finding out more about it.
After my own examination,
there's no doubt that it was a weather balloon carrying a special device that was then used to reflect radar energy so that meteorologists could track the movement of the balloon. And at the time, that was the accepted explanation. It's been only in the last 25 to 30 years, after most or all of the principal witnesses have died or have disappeared, that the myth has come along that it was really a crash saucer.
Central to the class Psychop investigation were the top-secret MJ-12 documents Stanton Friedman claimed to have received. The signature on the documents was that of US President Harry Truman. Friedman claimed it matched exactly a known-to-be-genuine Truman signature written a week later. Because the two signatures matched, Friedman claimed the MJ-12 documents must be genuine. Class disagreed.
He erroneously assumed that because they matched, that meant that the MJ-12 signature was authentic. In fact, it meant that it was a counterfeit, because our signatures are almost like snowflakes. No two are identical. Now, one of the interesting things here is the Harry Truman signature. In making the second vertical line of the H. Harry, his pen apparently slipped and he scratched unwittingly alongside. And if one looks at the authentic letter, sure enough, here is similar scratch marks along the vertical line of the letter H. Additionally, if one superimposes these two signatures, there is a match, with one exception, and that is that the MJ-12 document is slightly longer, about 3% longer. This is explainable because every time one makes a Xerox copy, the copy is slightly enlarged.
I think that they have a commitment to a viewpoint, a sort of religious viewpoint. They've become prominent as being antis. That's easy. Anybody can say, well, that's obviously a lie, that's a fraud, this person's a hoaxer. That's easy to say. You don't need to demonstrate anything. So they have a commitment. They don't want to admit that they've been wrong.
If a person sees a light in the sky and says, gee, maybe that light could be a spaceship from other worlds with interesting creatures, fine. That in itself is fairly harmless as myths go. But within the last several years, there has developed a new cult part of the UFO movement, which claims that alien visitors are abducting our children, impregnating our girls as part of an extraterrestrial genetic experiment, that they are cutting flesh samples out of our tiny children, and worse yet, that if they have selected your family for this genetic experiment, that your family is doomed almost to eternity.
It's inappropriate to call them skeptics. I'm a skeptic. I check. I verify. They're debunkers. No, don't bother me with the facts. Their minds are made up. That's their approach. No, I think they will go to their death convinced that they were doing right by the public. It's interesting that a great German scientist once said that new ideas come to be accepted, not because their opponents come to believe in them, but because their opponents die and a new generation grows up that's accustomed to them. So it seems to be with flying saucers. The debunkers will die and the new generation accepts them perfectly satisfactorily.
The world of science, of technology, operates on the basis of trying to explain new mysteries, new anomalies, on the basis of knowledge and principles that have been tested. If my computer here fails to operate and I take it in to have it repaired, I expect the repairman to look for familiar cause of failure, a defective microcircuit, a defective transistor, a defective transformer. I would be appalled if he threw up his hands and said, oh my goodness, your computer is infected with evil spirits.
I woke up one night, I heard the army march down. You hear the drums go dum 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 dum, come down the hill, along the front of the house, and fade into the distance. So the next day I said, I heard the drums last night. My husband looked at me and gave this funny little smile, you know. So when I came about a month later, I heard the drums again. I didn't dig. So listen, the drums. I said, I'm not dreaming. He said, oh my God, you know. You realise that I wasn't, you know, going a little bit...
That particular night, I was sleeping peacefully as I thought, and then a very old sounding motorbike of, say, 1920s vintage came over the bridge, long stroke engine, all the sounds of something really old, and crashed. And as it fell over, the headlight shone straight in the center of my bedroom window. Very, very frightening experience, because for some unknown reason I'd heard no other noises. I got out and looked, nothing there from the window next to the one with the glare of the light. And then after, well, feeling a little bit sick myself, as the time went on, it righted itself and went back over the bridge, the same sound going away in the distance.
I turned up on that hot July night, and I was assigned to the bedroom they call the morgue, which is very appropriate. And this is the most active room. Our first experience was that a presence came into the room. We had a cold spot. We were both engulfed in it, where our body temperature dropped about 12 degrees. It was about 1:15. 3/4 of an hour later, the big ingle nook fireplace, it sounded like there was something like a dozen rats playing football behind there. And I looked at Connie and I said, what is this? And she said, that's where the little girl was buried and found 100 years ago. Then the door latch lifted, opened, and I could hear, in this particular room, a party in full swing. Voices were loud. I could sense the activity of smoke and alcohol as one does when they walked into a party. I walked to the room, everything went completely quiet. That was the last experience of the night, but one thing I would say, last year I investigated 120 hauntings, and this is one of the most active houses I've had the pleasure of staying into up to this day.
On a night on my own here is tapping, doors, odd lights, sometimes a light in the ceiling, as if, to the effect as if water or something has been wasted above and left the mark. And there's that sort of dim light in the ceiling that's not there the next night. Odd doors will shut, the odd light will come on. Now this very last week we've had the electric stop at about 3 every morning, and all the electric clocks are out for a 2-minute interval, that's all.
Another ghostly case for the Committee for the Scientific Investigation into Claims of the Paranormal. PSYCOP member Sue Blackmore came to investigate.
From what I've heard so far, it sounds like a pretty good ghost story, lots of experiences, but pretty short on corroboration. I'm not convinced that we've really got ghosts on the other side yet. What I'd like to do is to look at all possible other interpretations, the reasons, for example, why they might want to have a ghost in their house, odd as that may sound. So to do that, I'd like to talk to them together when they agree with each other and separately.
What was it like in the beginning when your wife was believing that there was something happening and you were not believing it?
As you can imagine, I said, oh dear, Connie, in your old age, you're going a little bit over the top.
Bet she didn't like that much.
No, you're sadly like, you know, you're imagining things.
Yeah.
And she said, well, you're fighting it, you're walking away from it, which I was.
Do you think that your terminal nursing has had anything to do with the spirits here?
I don't really know, but I seem to be more aware of them. To me, it's positive proof for life after death. I feel that, you know, there is something afterwards. There's so much evidence on that.
What if someone, I'm sure they couldn't, but what if someone were to prove to you that there wasn't life after death? How would you feel about that?
I disprove it. I don't, there's no shadow of doubt whatsoever.
Yeah.
No way. No way.
The main evidence that it's anything more than just in one person's mind is that Mr. and Mrs. Glover both agree with each other about what they've heard and seen. But there's very good reason for that I've discovered by talking to them. In the beginning, when it was just Mrs. Glover experiencing things, it was obviously causing great strain between them. He was thinking she was getting menopausal and going a bit mad, and that upset her. And really, they had to resolve that somehow. The way they resolved it was by him also coming to believe in it and to agree with her. And of course, Graham has come in and corroborated that and made them both feel much happier. And I think now they're much happier because they agree. So one can see a clear motivation for them both to experience the same thing. I'm not saying that there's no ghost and that is the only reason, but it's a clear possible alternative. Do you actually manage to make a living out of going around and visiting haunted houses?
Yes, so basically I make my living out of broadcasting television, writing books, newspaper articles, so I don't...
It's very interesting, the very different role that Graham Wiley and I play in investigating a case like this. His main role is really to help the people to come to terms with what's happening, and it doesn't so much matter whether there really are ghosts or not. It's a bit like a doctor giving a placebo, if you like. He can help them a lot by corroborating what they've seen, by telling them and reassuring them that there are other people experiencing the same thing, and that helps them to come to terms with it. I'm more interested in whether there really is a ghost or not. But of course, it's no good for me to storm in there and say, look, there's not enough evidence, this isn't true. They're going to end up feeling that they're going mad, and I will have done them a lot of harm. But from a scientific point of view, that's the question I want to ask. I want to know, why are they having these experiences? And I don't really think it's because a ghost is coming to visit them. People come to the conclusion that something paranormal is happening because of the way they try to make sense of the world. They have strange experiences, and after all, psychology doesn't understand all our experiences. And they come up with theories to explain it. And half the time they come up with theories which, from science's point of view, are completely implausible. Communication mind to mind, spirits from the other side. But it helps them to understand their life.
In the beginning, I was under the impression that everyone that came here and stayed here would be aware of our guests, we call them. But you've got to have a sixth sense, apparently, to see them. So perhaps she wouldn't. She might come here and spend a night and not be aware. Or she might not. But in the beginning, I thought everyone would have this experience. But apparently I'm wrong.
The people believe that things go bump in the night, that there are hidden and deep forces that we cannot fathom, and that there is another occult universe beyond, which sometimes leaks into this universe, a la the paranormal.
Fascination with the paranormal doesn't change over the years, psychops say. Only the kind of phenomena we believe in.
The Chinese had flying dragons in the air, and there are all kinds of tales of actual accounts of seeing the dragons, breathing fire and such. Things seem to change in nature according to culture and century, and one would think that science, advancing at the rate that it does, of course, would bring us a different perspective on this sort of thing. All it does is put things from made out of wood and paper, they're suddenly made of chrome and stainless steel and mysterious metals from beyond the universe. I don't think there's very much change in the actual degree of credibility in these things, or expressions of credibility. I think it just changes slightly as the technology changes.
It's like the fashions in dress. First the skirts are up, then they go down. The lapels are wide, then they're narrow. So it's fashionable, I think. And the interests do change from decade to decade.
In the 1970s, it was astrology that captured the public imagination. At the same time, French psychologist Michel Gauquelin suggested that there was a much higher than chance correlation between people becoming top sports champions and the position of the planet Mars at the time of their birth. The circle is the average number of ordinary sports champions born in each sector of Mars' daily orbit. The other line shows that top champions are born more often after Mars has risen, culminated, or set. For Psychop, this was dangerous mumbo-jumbo, for it opened the door to the scientific acceptance of astrology, something they could not allow to happen. For Gauquelin, it was a fundamental challenge to science.
It's a double challenge because it's not only a new, bizarre effect, it's something that the ancient astrologers more or less claimed.
But I think there's no doubt whatsoever that the observation is correct. It has been repeated now about 7 times. In fact, it has been repeated by astronomers who try to discredit him. But there again, you can see the fanaticism coming in when the American astronomers and other people who are trying to repeat his work found that it came out the same way.
We published everything that Monsieur Gauquelin wanted us to publish. We've remained on good terms. There is a dispute of how you interpret the evidence. The Gauquelin case is still not complete. We're still investigating it, but I don't think that's true.
been going on for 15 years.
It's been going on for 15 years, and things in science take time. One has to be patient. One has to look at all sides of a question.
As far as I am concerned, I think, first, they rather despised me. They were rather sure that I used a bad methodology. I was not good enough to, well, just to figure out something accurate. And then, after sometimes, they discovered that I work accurately. So they say, well, so maybe Gauquelin cheated. They didn't exactly say that, but the implication was very clear.
Its critics saw the Gauquelin case as evidence of Psychop's strong-arm tactics. For founder-member Marcello Truzzi, who later resigned from Psychop, it was evidence of a much wider failing.
I think they confuse what skepticism is in science. They equate denial with doubt. I think in general they act as though evidence is a black or white matter, when evidence is always a matter of degree. They speak of no evidence when they really mean inadequate evidence, or should mean inadequate evidence. And more important than anything, rather than presenting themselves as advocates or lawyers for a side, they present themselves as judge and jury and unbiased potential gatekeepers for the rest of science, and I think that is dangerous.
On June the 1st, 1974, at 4:30 in the afternoon, a chemical plant at Flixborough exploded. 29 people lost their lives. 6 hours earlier, a woman claims to have had a startling premonition of the disaster.
I was watching television on the Saturday morning, watching the Saturday morning film, when it was interrupted and the word newsflash came on the screen. No pictures, just the word. And a man's voice told of this horrific explosion at Flixborough. He said, gave numbers of people that had died and people that were injured, and other chemical names, which unfortunately I can't remember. I believe that could have been the cause of the explosion. The newsflash went off and the film continued, and I assumed that this had actually taken place. So I told my friends who came in at lunchtime, and when we saw the news at night, it said that the explosion hadn't actually happened until at tea time. So we thought the reporters had got it wrong because I told them about it at lunchtime. Come Sunday morning, we got the Sunday paper, and in there it said it was 5 o'clock. So I called my friends down and I said, well, I told you about this at lunchtime. And it just made me feel really cold, because I realized then that I'd seen something that hadn't actually taken place.
One of the most robust phenomena that we study is in the area of precognition, where a person is able to describe today some event that will take place tomorrow. The familiar aspect of that, of course, is the fact that you go to bed tonight and dream of an elephant in the lobby of the hotel, and tomorrow you arise and find the elephant there waiting for you. So we would say that tomorrow's elephant was the cause of tonight's dream, which is a very surprising change in the ordinary causality. Now, the evidence for this kind of precognition is as overwhelming as the evidence for any of the other psychic phenomena.
The attempt to prove to science that psychic phenomena exist has itself become a science called parapsychology. Over the years, its best efforts have failed to impress Psychop. In earlier experiments at the Laboratory of Parapsychology, founder J.B. Rhine, testers claimed to be able to read symbols on hidden cards. Psychop said that the test conditions were so lax that cheating was both possible and likely. In other experiments, the mind was said to influence matter. This woman is trying to make randomly illuminated bulbs revolve in a clockwise direction. It seems to be working. Not so, say Psychop. The results could not be successfully repeated. And this woman is communicating these images, selected at random from a large photo library, telepathically to this woman. Psychops say that when they conducted similar experiments, there was no evidence of telepathic ability. But despite Psychops' criticisms, the old hands of parapsychology, like Russell Targ, remain convinced.
Evidence for psi phenomena is overwhelmingly convincing. There have been data collected now for several decades in all the different departments that parapsychologists investigate.
I believe the evidence is very strong, strong enough to warrant our saying that there no longer is any purpose in doing research that is aimed exclusively at providing further evidence that something interesting is going on.
The burden of proof that something is going on today rests on the shoulders of this man, Robert Jahn, professor of engineering at Princeton University. Psychop might find ghosts easy targets, but Jahn's work carries the weight of a reputation won in respectable science. One day, Jahn had a personal experience he found impossible to explain scientifically. An agent abroad was instructed to relay telepathically a description of his location to Jahn back at Princeton. Jahn was amazed at the description he received.
One aspect of the scene I was perceiving seemed so unreasonable and so implacable that I was tempted to reject it as spurious, and only with considerable effort did I commit myself to record the fact that in what was a common Paris street scene with cafes, colored awnings, taxi cabs, and whatnot, I was seeing over and over again the figure of a man attired in medieval armor, which certainly would not be anticipated in that context. Upon examination of the report of the agent, the person who was stationed at that scene, turned out that the allusion was to a piece of statuary on a building nearby, a building that actually had a row of period warriors, one of whom indeed stood in full medieval armor.
The suit of armor might exist on a mat on a table, it might exist on the cover of a book, on the shelf of the cafe, or in the kitchen. It might exist on a knife or a fork in the kitchen drawer. There's 101 ways, really, of finding a suit of armor in some form or another, or something to do with a suit of armor in a place like a cafe.
Yet in Jahn's tests, extraordinary descriptions have been made by people who claim only telepathic knowledge of the location. I have the feeling that the agent is somewhere near water, a very large expanse of water. There might be boats. Several vertical lines, sort of like poles. They're narrow, not heavy, maybe flagpoles? Some kind of circular shape, almost like a merry-go-round. It's round on its side, like a disc. Seeing vertical lines again seems to be a strong impression, these vertical lines. To one side, I get the feeling there's a small building. Could be a shed.
Well, I think everybody's experienced terribly impressive experiences at some time or another. The problem is being able to predict when they're going to happen in the future, and to be there when they happen, to record them. That's the problem, because in parapsychology they can't do that. They can only report about things that have happened in the past. Now, unfortunately, our memory is very selective, and so is our perception. So it's very easy for us to say after the fact that I had a dream about X, or I believed that X was at a certain place where there was armor or something like that in the background, and then to go along and look for those things that one felt were there, and then to find them. Because every place, you know, has only a simple number of shapes and forms and colours in it. It's very easy to do virtually any drawing and match it to almost any place.
Remember the description of the Danube Bridge? I have a feeling that the agent is somewhere near water, a very large expanse of water. There might be boats. Several vertical lines, sort of like poles. They're narrow, not heavy, maybe flagpoles. Some kind of circular shape, almost like a merry-go-round. It's round on its side, like a disc. seeing vertical lines again. Seems to be a strong impression, these vertical lines. To one side, I get the feeling there's a small building. It could be a shed. Jean's most challenging experiments have been in psychokinesis, the power of mind over matter. Sit in front of this machine, and, he says, you can use the power of your mind to shift the random or average distribution of the balls to the left or to the right. The implications for science, if he's right, are enormous.
Certainly, the traditional science of the present era does not include human consciousness as an active participant in the behavior of the physical world. It's our view that this is an oversight and needs to be corrected.
Concentrate your mind on this pendulum, and, Jean claims, you can slow down or speed up the rate at which it stops.
We believe we're looking at a very common human capability. We need, as it were, a modern metaphysics that reinserts our human consciousness into the physical system as an active ingredient rather than as a passive observer.
This machine randomly generates noughts and ones like the toss of a coin. The average should be 50% ones and 50% noughts. Concentrate your mind to get more ones than noughts.
A little bit higher.
For this man, it seems to be working.
In some way, human consciousness can interact with very simple, very rudimentary physical systems to influence rather slightly their performance, and that the output of these simple machines does reflect in a characteristic way the intentions and indeed the personalities of their human operators.
Jean's results are impressive. He has made the equivalent of 700,000 coin tosses. The first line shows the 50% of ones and the 50% of noughts expected by chance. The second line shows the accumulated effect of 700,000 attempts to produce ones rather than noughts. The likelihood of this having happened by chance is around 1 in 100,000. But does this mean that paranormal forces are at work?
Millions and millions of trials have been run. That is a binary event, which can be heads or tails, for example. Millions of those have been run, and very small deviations have occurred from chance, but as you've said, these are highly significant differences. But that doesn't mean that anything paranormal's happened. There are all kinds of ways in which you can get departures from chance, which are perfectly normal, have perfectly valid, normal explanations. The whole idea that that if you show something deviates from chance implies a paranormal event has occurred is totally wrong. I'm afraid that the whole parapsychology literature is filled with that kind of mythology.
We have in hand over 11 years of extensive experimental data acquired under extraordinarily tightly controlled conditions, which has yielded a statistical replicability far beyond what one normally deals with in many scientific or conventional scientific applications.
In my opinion, there's no strong scientific evidence to support the paranormal hypothesis. There are all kinds of anomalous events that happen to people in everyday life that are very hard, if not impossible, to explain. But when you do the experiments, or when you review the experiments that are being conducted, I'm afraid that the conclusions remain very negative.
I think it is a sense of threat to their own professional investment and to their own personal investment in the contrary paradigm that forces them to go to extraordinary extent to find a basis for disqualifying data or interpretations of the data that would conflict with that.
I think that a new definition of science will come sooner or later. I think more tests will have to be done, And let's face it, we all have telepathy. I'm sure that you and the viewers out there have experienced in the past some kind of a telepathical happening to them, and therefore it exists. It's a valid science. But right now we don't have the machinery or the tools or the computers to capture this power and say, look, here it is, it's captured, it's available, it's real, here is a proof. But once that will happen, I would think that many scientists, mainly the skeptics, will have to go back to their books and start their whole learning from the beginning.
I think we all want to believe. Everybody would love to believe in this stuff. It's fun, it's enjoyable, it's exciting. It's about the future. It's about what might happen when we die, all these things. I mean, who could say they're not interested in these things? The trouble is that we're pushing science beyond the boundaries of what can be proven, about what can be demonstrated. We can see events, we can experience things, we can want things to be true, but they're not necessarily true.